So this is where we do an EBR exercise, and we watch all the steps in code at a kind of microscopic level. And first thing I have to do is preach at you for a moment. What I've got, of course, is my own laptop, and not surprisingly, you can guess, because it's a MacBook, I've got a VM on it, and this happens to be Windows running inside the VM because I like it for certain purposes, and the database is in the Linux VM, and I can flash, what's it called now, revert to snapshot using standard VM technology. And for a time I was using that so that I could go back to my pristine starting state, because when you teach yourself EBR, you're going to want to do destructive things like drop the addition semantically or a dollar base that you had at the start. You can never go back and recover it. And if you're writing simple scripts that you want to be rerunnable and rerunnable as you're thinking about teaching yourself stuff, you want to be able trivially to go back quickly to a known starting state. So of course, coming out of the frame of mind you were in, finding the controller, going into manage snapshots, going into yes, go to that one, do you really want to? Yes, that could achieve it. But I decided after some years of doing that, that instead I would rather do the following. And that's, I hope we can see this. When I created the VM, I did the following. And I'm only telling you this because it made such a liberating effect on the way I worked that you might want to enjoy that too. I decided I'll set up the VM from complete scratch up to and as far as having 11.2, which I always need for reference, 12.1 and 12.2, you know, 12.102, 12.201, and a fully formed empty CDB in each. And then I took a snapshot using VM technology of that Linux VM. Then I went to create my PDBs, and when I created a PDB, one in each, one was enough for me, I made sure that the data files went on a spot in that illusion of the Linux file system that happens to be a spot in the outside MacBook world. So I've got a directory called PDBs. Here it is. It's one among who knows what in my way of organizing my material in my MacBook. But on that directory, I've got a place where I have files for the 12.1 and files for the 12.2 in two flavors. Never mind why I separated out the local undo paradigm and the shared undo paradigm. Let's look in the shared undo paradigm here. And what I've got here is an unplugged master. You may not be able to see it well enough, but those are set in the MacBook way of doing things to be strictly read-only. I even put a green blob by them to emphasize the fact that they're read-only, right? That means I'm confident that that's my fixed starting point. It can't even be changed by mistake. And by the way, having it out there, I don't need to fuss about making a backup of it every time I'm forced to take a new version of my VM system and on and on and on and back up the main part of it and this and that, which is nice in itself. Now, here I've got so-called cloned PDB, and you know you can create a PDB as a clone of a offline unplugged PDB, leaving the offline unplugged PDB untouched and copying its files. And that's what I do. This master here, gold master, this one, is a little more than the most primitive PDB you get immediately after creating it. I changed some passwords to be what I like. I put in the scott.emp because I like to have it there. I put in the hr.employees because I like to have it there. I set the the initialization parameter that turns PL/SQL warnings into errors because I like to work like that. Various things I like in myself. And in a more general case, that would contain a whole application at its starting state that you were going to prepare your EBR exercise for. So watch what happens here now when I look at that. I just go into my ordinary editing environment and I wired up a script, an ordinary SQL+ script that does drop PDB and stuff. It's not that, it's just one I won't show you, but I've got it on a menu, so I go drop both PDBs. There we go. How quick is that? Look, whoop, it's done. What happens out in the world? They've gone, right? And then I say, give me a 12.2 PDB, please. or I should say restore my 12.2 PDB from that unplugged gold master, dropping the one I have already if I happen to have it. So here we go. And the point of this is it usually finishes in notably less than 10 seconds. 10 seconds without shifting my paradigm over into point and click in some entirely different way where I can't script it is a real interruption of my thoughts. But here now, if I'm just typing in my editor, a whole load of complexly linked, connected SQL+ scripts, I've got a whole load of names that permeate all the files, and I suddenly don't like them. I realize I should have called it something else. That would have been so much more illustrative for my teaching. All I do is, while I'm doing my global search and replace, kick that thing off before I've even finished considering all the places humanly that I'm going to change. The thing's gone, and I didn't miss a beat. I'm only saying that for two reasons. First reason is, even if you don't do this, you absolutely must invest the effort to give yourself complete control over your own database, typically on your laptop, where you can just be the absolute god and do whatever you want in it. And you must also have a scheme quickly so that there's no psychological barrier to get back to a clean state. That way you can just experiment with no psychological breaks. And this last bit of luxury that I showed you, I never dreamt before I'd done it how game-changing it would be in the psychology. But having done it, I can just promise you it's enormously contributive to a smooth and slick working experience. Enough of that, I won't say that again. Now what I need to do is set up for a demo. And in order to do that, I'll get a bigger print thing. I just run the big reset script, okay? And here's another little bit of preaching. I've got time for this. I ran it. All it did in a completely virgin environment was create the stuff I needed. Now I run it again. And its appearance is the same. Notice how silent it is. Hardly says a word. I can't stop it saying connected when I connect somewhere else. And I've chose there for various reasons to have it say no errors, no errors. Basically, it's silent. And I've run this also in the regime of, what's it called, whenever SQL error exit. So if I didn't exit, I know I got no errors. And I don't have to look at anything. In particular, I don't have to see a ton of errors that you get if you try to drop something and it's not there, which you normally see in scripts of this kind. I can't stand that. So I just, if I wanted to drop something in case it was there, but knowing it might not be there, obviously you go begin, execute immediate my drop command, exception, when the guy I'm trying to drop wasn't there. That's perfectly okay, silent. Then carry on and create it, execute immediate, create the thing I want. How hard is that to do? Easy. How many people do that as a matter of routine? Me and no one else on the planet. So I recommend you switch to that because, again, you don't want to get confused. You want to run things time and time again. You can only study an output once to see if it's what you think it is. If it's 2 pages long and you get the same thing again, you're never going to manage humanly to study it and make sure it's still the same thing that you saw last time. And if you're going to diff and all that stuff, it's just such a waste of time. This is so much more appealing. Right, enough of that. Now I'm ready to start. So ideally, what I'm going to do is the following. In the green session, I'm going to, imagining that it's the third time I come around, I'm going to commit some pending DML I'd left over and create some pending DML and not commit. Okay, that's the pattern. Commit, create pending DML. Next time, commit, create pending DML, so that the pending DML will have a duration. In the red, I do exactly the same thing. And in the blue, I go step by step through the steps of the EBR exercise, so that whenever I do any step in the EBR exercise, both the red and the green have pending DML. And when I do the red, then it will be done after the EBR exercise did its next step, and that means it'll be done in the presence of one of these, in general, waiting to come through non-blocking DDLs, and I'll be really testing that way that the whole thing goes through. See what I mean? So I could have managed that by having 3 SQL+ scripts, one for the green, one for the red, one for the blue, each one with pause, and I could have hit the return in the red, gone from 1 to 1, hit the return and so on. I never managed to get through it, even in the peace and quiet of my own home, without pressing the wrong key in the wrong window. right? Never once. And so I just had to bite the bullet. I'm saying this because when you see this code, you'll see a whole ton of clutter that's beside the main point. I just had to accept the fact I need a big fat controller who will say, okay, green, you go red, you go blue, that kind of thing. Occasionally I have to go green, go red, go green, go red, go blue, you know, just once or twice for various reasons. So how do I do it? I could have used any number of methods. I decided to use dbms pipe, that hugely old-fashioned thing, because it was good enough for the purpose. So my big fat controller down the bottom is just going, go ahead green, go ahead red, go ahead blue, and the green is going, can I go? Instead of pause, a programmatic thing. And the red is going, can I go? And so on. And you can imagine how that's done. So then what I do is set the green guy going. And of course, the green guy will just, waiting, he's saying, can I go, can I go? Same in the red. Do I type R? Yes, R for red. Can I go? Right. Go to the blue. At blue, did I say B? Yes. R, okay. Before saying, can I go, I'm just showing you the state of the world. So what is this EBR exercise all about? It's really basic. Here, this is the heart of it all. I've got an additioning view. It's got a sensible name, T. It's got a column PK, which won't be affected at all by this. It's just you've got to have a PK, otherwise you're mad. And it's got a C, who is too narrow, right? It's a varchar column whose width is too narrow at 10. And notice it's got both a not null constraint on it and a unique constraint, who are here in the list of constraints. Of course there's a primary key constraint, but that's not our interest. And finally, because Oracle implements some of these constraints with indexes, there's a unique index behind the unique constraint, okay? I didn't want to write SQL statements who would remove the primary key stuff from the eyes. Maybe I should have done, I don't know. But whatever, the primary key stuff is not of interest. We're not going to touch it. The things of interest are, we've got a column, it's too narrow, it's got a unique constraint on it, it's got a primary key constraint on it. So clearly when we finish, we want to see here, additioning view T, still called that, PK and C, and the C will be not null, of course, and it'll be 50, let's say, and there'll be corresponding constraints, now presumably on TC wide, not null, and TC wide unique, and there'll be a corresponding index. That's where we're going, and we must accept the fact that the table, T underscore, at the start, who has a PK and a C in it, will at the end, of course, have a PK and a C wide in it. It'll have columns that are differently named, but they're not visible in the application because the addition view bridges the gap. You with me there? So now we set off the big fat controller and we go. K for controller, right. And he's saying now just hammer at the return. So I'm going to let the green go. There we have it. That's what I told you would happen. The green, because it's a repeating pattern, commits, though there's nothing to commit, sleeps for a little bit. Never mind why I'm doing that. It's for a particular reason, but it's too hard to explain. And then I set up some pending DML, just to keep things consistent. In the green, I'm always going to insert, and I'm always going to insert some kind of mammal, or at least some kind of animal, I should say. Do I mean that? No, I mean mammal. Birds are animals, aren't they? In the red, as you see now, I'm going to do the same idea. I'm going to commit, sleep a bit, and insert some kind of bird, right? And then in each I query, there was a blue fish in there before I started, being neither mammal nor bird. And the green shows what he inserted, the cat and the blue fish, and the red shows what he inserted, the starling and the blue fish. There's no mysteries. That's Oracle. You know how that behaves, yes? Each is seeing their own world, and they can't see the other guy's uncommitted stuff, but they can see their own uncommitted stuff. No mysteries there. The line of dots means exactly that I've done that step completed. Okay, that's critical as part of the pattern. And what we're aiming to see then, because we're aiming to see proper unaffected, non-blocked activity in the red and the green, is every single step that happens, it does it, and we get the line of dots, right? In the blue, we may or may not get the line of dots because it may or may not be a blocking operation. Sorry, may or may not be a non-blocking operation that has therefore to wait. First thing we do is create a new edition. There we are, we've done it. We created a new edition and switched into it. Creating an edition is never sensitive to pending DML. Okay? If I didn't say it clearly enough, I will say it now. Even though this is being recorded, I'll send a zip file to Matthias when we're done. And that zip file will have the slides that I've been using. I may as well give you the PowerPoint in the zip as well, so that our man can work on the video. And it will have a whole code corpus that's this demo, okay? But it will have only the tiniest of external doc. And you will understand what it is by virtue of me having explained it. But I have written it in such a way that you ought to be able to just change a connect command in each of 2 files and then just run the thing and run it and rerun it and rerun it and rerun it. Obviously, you'd want to do it in a privately controlled database. And you ought to use 12.2, which of course you can easily have in your own private world, because some of the DDLs whose non-blocking nature I rely on became non-blocking only in 12.2. Okay, so now we carry on just by hammering. Same again in the green, same again in the red, and now what we see in the blue is we're going to do alter table add column. Okay, and we don't see the line of dots yet. This is exactly the behavior I told you to expect. Just to make absolutely sure you know what the main aim is, I want to widen the column semantically. I want the editioning view to see that it's had a widened column. I can't actually widen the column. I can only put a wide column by the side and keep them synchronized with cross-edition triggers. Yes? Clearly. That's what we call the replacement column paradigm. If I had tried to widen the column in place, the world would have gone mad, as you know. I can only do it this second copy, secret copy way. So now we'll make the green go ahead, and notice that when the green tries to go ahead, we've got the blue who can't get through yet because the red and the green are holding him up. So now the green went through. But when we did the blue was held back both by the green and the red. The green's not holding back the blue any longer, but the red still is. So the next thing we should see is that the red goes ahead, and at the same time, the blue completes that step. Okay, so watch carefully. Okay, so there it was. So now we've seen one example of how these non-blocking DDLs manifest. And now we'll carry on and do the next step. So once again, there is the next step, right? That wasn't the next step. The other thing just finished, and now we're doing the next step. What is this? This is exactly creating the forward cross-edition trigger. You can see I'm creating it disabled. If you didn't know what the syntax was, you see what it is now. It's kind of brain dead. I've just got to find a spot to squeeze in those words, forward and cross-edition, and that's the spot. Otherwise, it's just a trigger like any other trigger. Before update or insert, obviously I don't need to do anything on delete, and it's on the underlying table, and it's for each row, of course, and the body of it is blindingly obvious. I say that the wide column gets the value that I just changed in the narrow column. Yes? Simple. And then as I explained to you, only then I enable it. That's what we need to do so we don't get mysterious errors because we're doing DDLs in the presence of never stopped DMLs. And now we do this famous wait on pending DML. The guts of it is a call to sys.dbms utility .wait on pending DML. Basically, all I'm going to do is identify the table or list of tables that I care about, say how long I'm prepared to wait before I give up. You know, I could set it for a year and it would then patiently wait for a year. Maybe that's not the best thing to do. If there's some stupid blocker, I want to know about it and then do something manual about it. That's loosely speaking well, I won't say anything. It's just a freedom we have here. And then there's more subtlety here than you might have thought you might need. But if I just set this SCN thing to null, I'm saying I'm interested in all the pending TML that obtained in the whole system. At the moment I said this. So clearly now I'm just going to patiently wait here until finally the red and the green and the red, sorry, have committed. So I'll do it, right? The green commits, the blue couldn't yet go ahead. The red commits, and the blue does go ahead. And at this moment then, I haven't done it yet. The blue finished. The next thing I'm going to do is something in the blue. But I'm saying that the cross-addition trigger, where's my mouse gone? The cross-addition trigger can now be trusted. Okay? I don't know if you can see all those words, but I am reading them out aloud. So now we're ready to do that mechanical apply step. So we always call it apply, applying the transformation. And same, there we are, we're doing it. So what did we do? We applied the transform here, that finished, and I went ahead and I did the next step. If I did every single step in its own little iteration around the loop, this would take forever. So I'm allowing myself to squish two together now and then. What's going on in its highlighted area? What I'm really trying to do is say update t underscore set, it could have been pk equal pk, I've said set c equals c, it doesn't matter what I say. This is causing the trigger to fire. Now remember that a forward cross addition trigger fires in response to DML that hits the table from the old edition, but I'm sitting in the new edition. This is just the way you spell it. I don't want to alter session set edition back to the old one and just do the update for two reasons. One, I just don't want to do that, so I stay here. And the other, yet more subtle, I have to use this special flavor of DBMS SQL.parse. This is yet another overload who says, obviously the usual things, the cursor and the language flag and the statement. What are these two things here? They seem to be saying the same thing in subtly different ways. I'm saying that the forward cross addition trigger who should fire is the one whose name is FWD. And I'm also saying it's true, it ought to fire. What does that mean? If I had, crumbled and listened to Tom Kite and Graham Wood and accepted writing an explicit SQL statement, who I would just use to do the whole table, I still have to say that I'm doing that SQL statement to have the effect of the cross addition trigger that has that corresponding logic in it, whose name is FWD. I need to do that because under certain circumstances we need cross addition triggers to fire in a particular order. I haven't got time to explain the scenarios that bring about that. Let's just say it's needed, and because it's needed, I have to do it this way. I have to say, in my case, I want you to just fire the trigger. It's called that, and just do it, please. Had I written my own SQL, I would say that the trigger I'm emulating is forwards, but false here, because I'm doing it myself by having a real SQL statement here instead of this dummy one, who really does the algorithmic effect. Was that too much to follow, or did you get the rough idea? Yeah? The high-level way to say this is, there's just a recipe for the way you do it, and this is the recipe. And if you look in the code, you'll see what it is, and if you're puzzled by anything, you can look back in the docs, okay? It's ultimately, you could think about it that way. And when that was done, we went on to do the next step, which of course will hang in again. This is now the step to put on the not null constraint. We couldn't put on the not null constraint in the replacement column while it was empty. That's meaningless. We had to create it nullable. Now we're putting it on. And look how we spell it. It's the ordinary stuff you'd expect to see, modify and constraint and what it's called and the fact it's not null, and enable no validate. Why that? Simple. It was rocket science to get this to work, and the way the rocket scientist managed to get it to work was by doing it this way. Once it's there and enabled, in a second pass you can validate it. If you wanted to do it as you normally do offline, all in one go, well, he couldn't find a way to do that. It was too hard. And so if you just spelt it other than enable no validate here, it would be a blocking DDL, not a non-blocking DDL, and you'd get that timeout error. So now I'm going to take the opportunity to say something which is crucially important. First, basically, and then as a high-level preaching point, it's this. If you want to be sure that the EBR exercise script that you've written will run in production without hanging forever or without aborting with an error, then you have to simulate some testing while you're testing it. So you have to simulate some special stuff while you're testing it. You really, really have to simulate this concurrent end user activity. And though you could think of using real application testing and replay something, that isn't guaranteed to meet your purpose. Rather, you want to just contrive it so that there's always pending DML, just as I'm doing by hand here. So you can imagine you want it to be mechanized because it's testing and so on. You would need a pair of scheduler jobs who run on that kind of sleep until idea that I mentioned, sleeping until in antiphase, right? One going forward every hundreds, one every 150s, so that, and doing this, you know, commit from last time and more stuff, so that they, in concert, would ensure that there was always pending DML. See what I mean? And only by doing that can you be sure that you're testing properly. The real application testing thing just might not happen to have been lucky enough to catch this kind of thing. So you could say that there's two kinds of testing you should do while you're developing the script. One is to make sure it gets through at all, in which case you have to just contrive the situation like I've just done here. And the other is to see if, contrary to expectation, there is, for some reason of unskillful patch development, a noticeable performance impact of running the script. And there you would want some realistic simulation of actual workload, for which purpose you could use real application testing. Okay? Now, don't forget we're going to get to hot roll over here, so we would also need a pair of scheduler jobs going in antiphase to do the tasks in the regime of the new edition. In this case, their sequels would be spelt the same, but in different cases, the sequels would have to be spelt differently because we'd done some refactoring of data. Okay? Does that make sense? So now the meta point, the preaching point, it's this. If you ever thought that doing patching and upgrading of your application EBR style was going to be easier than doing it offline, forget that. It's kind of self-evident. It's much easier just to kick everyone off the system and have the luxury of a quiet system and just be God and do stuff than it is to do stuff while the thing's in use. It's like trying to change the wheels on an airplane while it's still flying. It's harder to do that than it is just to take it out of service, put it up on some equipment and change the tires, yes? So you're not going to adopt EBR and use EBR to do your patching unless there's a real business driver for doing it. One would have thought that saving $30 million a year was such a business driver, but who knows? See what I mean there? Just always come back to that you've got a stark choice. Take downtime and whatever that implies, or bite the bullet and work harder to do it in zero downtime. So let me move on now. Bang. Bang. It's not interesting to look at the detail of what the red and the green blue, because they do it every time. The only thing of interest is to see, I get me dots, and what are we going to do now? We're going to create the unique index. And here we have to actually use the keyword online. You've just got to spell these things right. I personally think that's an irritation. I don't know why they didn't just let it be the ordinary spelling and let it be magically online. But you can't use that magic word online unless you're in the Enterprise Edition. It was a kind of technique to serve that goal. Moving on then. Same again, same again, same again. This is where we have to do a double dance. You know, just take that double dance thing before the blue finally goes ahead as evidence of the fact that this is really rocket science, this non-blocking DDLs under the covers. The fact that I had to do a double dance before the blue went ahead is of no consequence when you're conducting the exercise. It was just for getting the demo that I had to do that carefully, because in the real world, you know, it would just wait a smidgen longer before the blue went ahead. What are we at now? Alt table T, add constraint. We're doing the unique one now, and it's the same dance again. Enable, no validate. That's just the magic way to spell it. Bang, bang. That one finished. Now we do the next step in the blue, which is, as it happens, insensitive to pending DML. This is where we do enable, validate, and just for sport, so that I don't have to come around this loop too many times, I'm now redefining the additioning view so that it now selects the wide column, yes? So everything I've talked about, everything I've shown you in pictures is now crystal clear, isn't it, in actual code. I'm just redefining the additioning view so that it selects the wide column as the name, I should have put the word as in there, but it's optional, as the name you want it to be in the logical world of the application. Strange that you have to go enable no validate and then enable validate afterwards, but that's just what you have to do. Otherwise, the non-blocking character that you want becomes the blocking character that you don't want. Ba-bam, ba-bam. What's the next thing we do? We just look to see where we're standing now. What I've done is put the reverse trigger in, and here it is, you know. Actually, we should look at that, and then we've enabled it. What's the logic here? Let's examine that here and now. We've got two choices, haven't we? This is the one that sort of comes to mind. I'm saying narrow gets wide. You might feel uncomfortable about that. You might think, well, God, that might cause an error. You might be tempted to say whatever syntax you need to achieve the result. Narrow gets the first 10 characters of wide, right? You could certainly write that. Now, which of the two is the right one to write? If you don't want an error to appear on the screen, so to speak, then you have to say the narrow one gets the first 10 of the wide. But do you really want that? What does that mean? Think of the hot rollover. The person using the new version thinks he can insert 50, so he does. If you're the guy in the call center scenario, you know, you phone up and you say, you know, he asks you, briefly give me the minimum summary of the problem, and you go blah, 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 and he says, right, I've got that. It fits. And then the guy who looks at you next, who's on the old, sees only the first 10 characters. That's no good. It's a semantic error. And indeed, next time it comes back into the new, it would have been chopped off. So while you could write that, it's clearly not the thing to do. The only plausible thing you can say is narrow gets wide, which means if you put in a wide, it'll cause an error. I mean, that was always the case too in the running steady state. And of course, you handle that error and translate it back up to the UI to say, oh, I'm terribly sorry, the system just limits you to 10 characters. Yes? Yes? So at the moment, the functionality you want is prevented, right? That's my key point. This is a sufficient example to show that the aim of this particular patch is not realized until later on. Now, in a complete, nicely done UI, you would probably use that mechanism that stops you typing more characters in. So you couldn't get more than 10 in on the screen. So this constraint would never be exercised anyway. But you have to have the constraint there, don't you? Because you can't trust the UI guys to do that right. You can't run the risk of corrupting the data, but you would expect that it's done right. And then what you can see is only later on, there must be some specially engineered scheme for this so they can turn a switch to change the limit in the UI from 10 to 50. If you decide in advance you need that dynamic possibility, it's easy enough to program that, isn't it? So, that having been said, see what it says down here. It says, well, no, here, sorry. We've now noticed that 2 sessions are still using $or base, the first edition. 1 session, my actual patch script, is using the new edition. So hot rollover is ready to begin. These 2 red and green haven't yet flipped over, but a new session that starts would use the new edition because the traffic director has thrown the switch. So I'm going to simulate that now. I'm going to do this. Where's it gone? And I'm going to run that in a brand new session. There. What happened? And of course, the fact that we get an error on a screen is not an error in the way I wrote the script. I wanted you to see that error, yes? That's the one that is just hammering that nail in with a big sledgehammer in your memory, saying the functionality that you want is not yet available for obvious reasons, right? So this kind of hot rollover is the device that lets you get to the new with zero downtime, but what you really want in the new is not exposed until the hot rollover is over. And it's crucially important, I should say, to understand that EBR was not invented to give you the possibility of running 2 or several versions of your application concurrently for an indefinite time. And I'm saying that so energetically because I don't know how many conversations I've had where some middle manager has come to my attention, you know, because of they can't work out how to do X, and so I have to be on a conference call. And their opening gambit is, we really like EBR because it lets us have 3. We're always going to have 3 versions of our application concurrently, so we can fall back to the last one, or if we want, fall back to the one before. They just haven't grasped this because they're thinking of only some special cases. And my high-level point here is, if you base your whole philosophy on the special case, it's bound to end in tears when you meet the general case. The only sensible thing to do is set yourself up mentally for the general case. And that means you cannot think that EBR lets you run things in tandem for an indefinite period. In this example, of course, you could prolong the hot rollover for an indefinite period. You could prolong people running the old for as long as you wanted. But what would it buy you? Nothing, because at the moment the new looks just like the old, yes? And you can't make the new look like you want the new to look like until people have left the old. Sorry if that seems too much hammering and hammering and hammering, but trust me, I've been through this conversation so many times with so many different people, I think it's better to nip it in the bud first. So, where was I? Now, what I'm going to do in the next steps then is flip the green and flip the green into the next edition. Flip the green, flip the red, so that now I can say hot roller is finished. So here we go. It says at the top, changing edition. Okay, so just some little thing for when you see the code so you're not confused. I wanted the best visual demo effect on the screen. So my scripts are not running the SQL statements just like that. Rather, I've got a package with each SQL statement I want in some text constant. And then when the step comes, what I do is DBMS output that text, and then under the covers execute immediate that text. And sometimes I just execute immediate what I need to do, or DBMS session set edition deferred what I want to do, and DBMS output the fact that I did it, because I felt that produced the best pedagogic effect. So there's a trade-off. The more energy I put into making it exactly the pedagogy I want, the more bulky the code becomes, and the more confusing you might find it, because we got conflation between the actual EBR exercise and all the apparatus of pedagogy on the side, yes? And so at that point, just let me mention this. When you get the slides, you might prefer to, first time you do this, just set up that basic starting point manually. You can see how to do that from my scripts. And then just do each of these SQL statements in a single session, not bothering with the simulated stuff in the others yet, and just make sure you understand what each is doing. And here they are. You could copy and paste off all these, yes, on and on and on in one session, and then you'll perhaps get a better understanding of things, yes? This is all that stuff, big print, you can think about it, copy and paste, you're doing it at your own pace without the clutter of the other thing. But now back to this, what we do, now we'll flip over the red as well. And so, just as mentioned, the fact that it says changing edition ... this one is now using E1, that's all DBMS output, while behind the scenes I did the right thing. and then this is appearing like it is. I'm saying number 28. That's just DBMS output of a SQL statement behind the scenes. I'm actually even DBMS outputting the slash to make it look more realistic. Obviously, there's no slash behind the scenes, and so on. And now we can see over here that everyone, oh, sorry, no, I haven't done it yet. Wait a minute, I have to do this one. Everyone now is in E1. 4, why 4? There's the big fat controller is not in this world. He doesn't matter. There's the other window, exactly. So now we can carry on. And now I think we can see, where is it? Sorry, what's happened here now? This and this and this. We're just now taking the brakes off now, right? I'm disabling this trigger and dropping it, and disabling that and dropping it, and now I'm dropping the unique constraint. Perhaps I should have dropped the unique constraint first to be more cautious. I somehow pressed the button too fast and missed showing you that I dropped the not null constraint in the special online way. It's critical that you have to drop the not null constraint before you take away the cross addition trigger. Otherwise, again, you'd violate the rule and you'd get errors in the running addition. So then, sorry, that's okay. It was you who made us finish at 17:10 instead of 17, and now you're going at 17. Something's not quite right there. Now then, this, and what we're now saying is, more stuff of the same. I'm just, what am I doing here? This is where I'm dropping the covered objects, right? Notice that I'm using this famous DBMS SQL trampoline. I'm saying that the addition is my parent addition. I'm bouncing into it to do that drop of the things that I want, okay? In this case, it's just one additioning view, and I'm dropping it very much by hand. Right, carrying on. I'm waiting for this to appear. This, and this, and this, and now we're done. I somehow managed to miss, I don't know how, the one that told me to do the step over here, but I'll do it by hand now, which is this. I'll, where's it gone? This guy. I'll now try it. What have we got here? That insert statement. I'll try it again. This time it succeeded. Of course, it does succeed because there's no cross-addition trigger trying to squish it back. So what have I got now? If I select the stuff from the underlying table, select star from T underscore, I suppose I should say order by PK to be proper about these things. What do we see? Ah, damn, it's too late. I took away, I set unused the narrow column. What I was hoping to show you, I could do it one more time, is I will do it one more time. Sorry, I'll just say at reset. Reset. I'm not going to miss the chance to show this bit. It's so crucially important. You see, without the big fat controller, I'd have never managed to get it through, because even with it, I've pressed the buttons too energetically, and I forgot to say what I wanted to say. So, at green, at red, at blue, at K. Okay, hammer it through. What I'm just going to stare at the bottom window. And, you could think of this as what you would see if you did the DBMS scheduler job thing. You would just see, you wouldn't see any output from the red and the green. You'd just see your EBR exercise running through. And that's the result you want, that it gets from start to finish, doesn't error, and doesn't hang. Here's where I'm supposed to insert that thing, so I'll do it. This is what you saw before. Nothing new this time. Where's it gone? This is the error you saw before. Back to the big fat controller. Carry on. And at such a certain point, I must be careful here. Right, what have I just done? I've dropped all the constraints. I haven't yet set that column unused. It's still there. Now I'm going to do the insert and the commit and the select from the table, just as I did by hand. And what we see now is what I wanted to show you before, that sure enough, the wide value has gone in the wide column, but the narrow column has got nothing in it. Of course it's got nothing in it. We had to do that. What does that tell us about rollback? You know, as people sometimes say, you can't. You've cut the cord, right? You're no longer preserving values in the old. And that's just the same as if the whole thing had been done with downtime. Once you've opened up in the new and you're accepting wide values, you can't go back to the old without throwing away that data. Okay? Same thing. And you have to keep on bearing that in mind, that EBR didn't change the laws of mathematics. It hasn't invented time travel or anything like that, or solved sort of mysterious paradox. We haven't got a wormhole in space or a Stargate. It's just conventional thinking, and it achieves just one thing for you. But that one thing is gold dust. You can achieve what you would have achieved in downtime, where the aim is to get to that result smartly with zero downtime. So then, just so that we've seen it one more time, I'll show you the last steps. Concentrate on the blue. What are we doing? What we're now doing, when we come round to it, is seeing what we've got there. We've got, you know, this guy has gone invalid because we've set the, I didn't show it on the screen, we set the column unused. That's kind of natural. And now we're getting rid of it because we don't want to be troubled by invalid objects. We come round, whoops, sorry, I'm in the wrong place now. We come round, and when we finally finish, this is the bit I didn't draw out, now I'll draw your attention to it. Job done. This is our additioning view. It's still called T, it's still called column, still got columns in called PK and C. The PK wasn't of interest. C is indeed now, in the logical world, magically wider, and it's accepting magically wider values. And we've got constraints. Now, the unique and null constraints, as promised, have names, as I like to have them, that represent the names of the columns in the physical table. And we've got correspondingly an index whose name again reflects the name C wide. And I argue those are the right names for it because it's all down at the physical level where the column is indeed called C wide, right? So, job done. What I'm going to say now is that we can conclude. And by all means, Q&A. This is the slide I showed you at the start, and I really do think it's true now that you could see all the layers that lay behind that bald sentence, code changes are installed in the privacy of a new edition. You know everything about that, what that means. Data changes are made safely only additively, either in new columns in the same table, as we saw in this widening thing, or in a pivoting kind of example that I used at the beginning, just to remind you what refactoring means, in an entirely different table, while the old table remains as it was. I said, and now it's crystal clear what I mean, that the device that brings the physical table that doesn't participate in the whole wonderful world of editions directly into that world, it's the editioning view. So you now know what the editioning view is. And I've said that and showed you in great detail now what the story of the cross-edition trigger is. That we've got forward and reverse ones, that they fire when they need to fire. You don't have to write code to do that. We do that for you. And that the forward one is where you put the code for going in that way, the reverse one on and on and on. They're both needed during the EBR exercise. They are not present in normal life. Your aim is to get rid of them as soon as you can, which you do, right? It's another reason, by the way, for not thinking that you're going to have concurrent operation of old and new indefinitely. You just want those slightly awkward, slightly performance penalizing things out the way as soon as you can. I mentioned that we've introduced this whole wonderful scheme of non-blocking DDLs, and I reminded you that the whole apparatus wouldn't work without fine-grained dependency tracking, both things which were new in 11.1. And I mentioned, I won't repeat this in detail, you want a proof of concept, or sorry, you want something that you can use to convince the doubters that all this is robust, that it's fully functional, that it's, in other words, tried and tested, and that it has no performance consequences, no negative performance consequences. Just refer to eBusiness Suite. If you want examples of how ordinary mortals manage to do it without how, sorry, I'm getting confused now. If you want examples of how ordinary customers manage to take EBR into use without hand-holding from Oracle headquarters, Salesforce, American Express, Move It, and I forgot to put it on this slide, MoneyGram, okay? And you really, really appreciate that this whole apparatus, uniquely in the whole world of HA, is wielded in the development shop. And of course, by the way, site administrators or superintendents of the installed production database will need to understand it, because in a way they're the ones who will, I guess, if they're doing their job very carefully, read all the scripts and really feel confident that what has been produced will work. And perhaps they will understand it so well that they'll interrogate the developers, the representative of the developers. How did you do your testing? Did you simulate online activity? How did you do it? Did you ensure that you contrived a situation where there was always pending DML? See what I mean? Because I guess it's the superintendent of the installed production database who would be called out in the middle of the night, or who would get the blame if it didn't work. And there are some next steps, you know, read some stuff, or watch this delightful 6.5-hour movie when it's been post-processed. But I would like to finish, this is the last slide, with now another appeal to a special new way of thinking by anecdotal reference. People who adopt EBR, generally speaking, announce that their goal is to avoid downtime, right? It's a kind of easy to understand thing, and you can understand why they got there. But when they've got it in place and working, they suddenly realize that if only they'd had hindsight, which they now, of course, have information to have, they'd have put it a different way. Because the benefits that they're getting are not only that they manage the exercise with no downtime, but because it's not causing downtime, the people administrating it in the live production system can do it in ordinary working hours. Therefore, their time is much cheaper. Moreover, because no one is watching the clock, they feel far more relaxed. And the guy from Move It illustrated that when he gave his open world talk by saying he was just about to open up the hot rollover when he got a phone call from his wife. You know, he's really, really in trouble now because he was supposed to buy some flowers and take them home for some important thing in the evening, and he hadn't done it. And he was able to, oh my God, go and do that errand, leaving the whole EBR exercise, you know, with the forward cross-edition triggers firing, no reverse yet firing because he hadn't gone into hot rollover. Come back, you know, completely relaxed, job done, you know, he saved his marriage, and carry on. I mean, you couldn't do that if you were the administrator over the weekend at midnight, you know, where every second counts, you know, you couldn't suddenly rush off, even if your kid had died, you know. I guess you'll have to edit that out of the film, but you know what I mean. And that's one thing. In other words, having this apparatus in place saves you money in all those ways, right? Another thing is, of course, if contrary to expectation, in the production environment, you realize some glitch in the whole thing, again, you don't have to panic about it. You can take your time, diagnose the problem, tweak the thing, and go forwards, just comfortably. Whereas, if you were doing that in downtime, and you were unable to diagnose the problem in about 10 seconds, there'd be someone forcing you to roll back and come up again so that you can be in production again. Never mind you achieved nothing. The result would have been an expensive and troublesome outcome, costing overtime rates of your staff, all to deliver precisely nothing. Yes? So you get away from all that too. And the last thing in this space, again, it's hugely liberating, and no one predicts it until they're experiencing it, and then they realize how wonderful it is. It's that once this whole apparatus is in place, you can be, I hate to use the word, I'm self-conscious about using such a trendy word, but you can be genuinely agile. You can deliver small amounts of functionality frequently into the production environment, exactly because you don't need some huge committee bureaucracy to work out when you can, right? You can just do a little bit, and you can do it just when you're ready. With the downtime patching thing, you have to set the next window. If we were talking about it now, it might be, say, in May, right? And if the downtime is going to be in May, you have to set a date end of March when the kind of bill of items that you're going to do in that is fixed. So some poor team who's got their thing almost ready, and then April the 1st, they're finally ready, they've missed not the train that goes then, but the train that goes, you know, a few weeks, month, 2 months after that date. So the downtime patching regime imposes phenomenal lack of agility on you. And this is also a liberation. And I'll finish by saying that one customer who I've visited on this tour, who have their development shop in Bucharest, they're the development arm for a German outfit who do something like Amazon for large shops and so on, who want to buy, who knows, toilet paper in truckloads, you know, but it's basically like Amazon for the large buyer. They have about 1,000 production databases dotted around the outfit all over the world, as I recall. Many of them don't have a zero downtime requirement at all, but when they wanted to go agile and DevOps too, mechanize everything, they were just held up at the last step because they couldn't deploy into production with the same pace, because they couldn't conduct the human negotiation required to find the downtime window in a acceptable, you know, speed. And they'd get that situation, we agreed on this, oh no, I have to go back on it now because X happened and so on. And so they decided to adopt EBR just so that they could achieve, in the environment where there was no specific pressure for zero downtime, the agility that they wanted.